When Marcus Jordan brought home his homeless friend Elijah Rivera, something incredible happened. Michael Jordan heard the boy's last name and froze. His face went white, his hands started shaking, and he stared at the 16-year-old like he couldn't believe his eyes. You see, years ago, a soldier named David Rivera saved Michael's life by taking a bullet for him. That soldier had always talked about wanting a son named Elijah. Now, standing in Michael's house was a homeless boy with that exact name, a boy whose father had disappeared 2 years ago. Michael knew he had to find David Rivera. But David was broken and hiding in a hospital, convinced his son was better off without him. Would Michael's shocking discovery bring a father and son back together? Or would the truth tear apart what little hope this family had left? The heavy oak door of the Jordan mansion swung open with its usual creak. Marcus Jordan stepped inside, his red and black basketball shoes squeaking against the marble floor. His Chicago Bulls practice jersey was soaked with sweat, and his dark hair stuck to his forehead. But today was different. Today, Marcus wasn't alone. "Come on," Marcus whispered to the boy behind him. "Don't be scared." The second boy moved slowly, his worn sneakers silent on the expensive floor. His clothes were clean but old, a faded blue t-shirt and jeans with small holes at the knees. He carried a small backpack that looked like it held everything he owned. His dark eyes moved around the grand entrance, taking in the crystal chandelier and painted walls. "This is really your house?" the boy asked quietly. "Yeah, it's home," Marcus said, dropping his basketball bag by the door. "Dad? Mom? I'm back." The thin boy shifted his weight from one foot to the other. His name was Elijah Rivera, and he was 16 years old. For 3 weeks, he had been sleeping in the school gymnasium after the janitor let him in through a back door. For 3 weeks, he had been washing his clothes in the school bathroom sink and eating whatever free food he could find. But Marcus didn't need to know all that. Not yet. Heavy footsteps echoed from down the hall. Michael Jordan appeared around the corner, walking out of his home office. He was tall and strong, wearing a simple white t-shirt and blue jeans. Even at home, he moved like the greatest basketball player who ever lived. "Hey, son," Michael said with a smile. "How was practice?" His eyes moved to the second boy, and his smile became curious. "Who's your friend?" Marcus grinned and put his arm around Elijah's shoulder. Elijah tried not to flinch. He wasn't used to people touching him with kindness. "Dad, I want you to meet my friend from school," Marcus said proudly. "This is Elijah." Michael stepped forward and held out his large hand. "Nice to meet you, Elijah." Elijah shook the famous hand with his own smaller one. "Nice to meet you too, sir," he said in a voice barely above a whisper. "What's your last name, son?" Michael asked. His voice was friendly, but something in his eyes had changed. Elijah swallowed hard. "Rivera, sir. Elijah Rivera." Asterisk, the color drained from Michael Jordan's face. His hand, still holding Elijah's, began to shake slightly. His mouth opened, then closed, like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. For a moment, the man who had never been nervous on any basketball court looked like he had seen a ghost. "Rivera?" Michael repeated, his voice strange and quiet. "Yes, sir," Elijah said, confused by the reaction. Michael stared at the boy, really looked at him. The dark hair, the careful way he stood, the polite voice. Something deep in Michael's chest began to pound like a drum. "Dad?" Marcus asked, worried. "Are you okay?" Michael didn't answer right away. He kept staring at Elijah, his mind racing back through years of memories. Rivera. How many Riveras could there be? How many Riveras would have a son named Elijah? Michael started, then stopped. He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry, boys. You just reminded me of someone I used to know." Sarah Jordan's voice floated from the kitchen. "Marcus? Is that you, honey?" "Yeah, Mom." Marcus called back. "I brought a friend home." Sarah appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. She was beautiful and kind, with warm brown eyes and a gentle smile. When she saw Elijah, her smile grew even warmer. "Well, hello there," she said. "I'm Sarah, Marcus's mom." "This is Elijah Rivera," Marcus said quickly. "Can he stay for dinner?" Sarah looked at her husband, expecting him to welcome their guest. Instead, she found Michael still staring at the boy with an expression she had never seen before. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking. "Michael," she asked softly, "everything all right?" Michael blinked, coming back to the present. "Yes," he said quickly. Yes, of course. Elijah, you're welcome to stay for dinner. But his voice sounded far away, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. Elijah noticed the strange tension in the room, but didn't understand it. All he knew was that he was standing in the most beautiful house he had ever seen, and Marcus Jordan, the only friend he had made since becoming homeless, wanted him to stay for dinner. Thank you, sir, Elijah said politely. That's very kind. As Sarah led the boys toward the kitchen, Michael stayed behind in the entrance hall. He leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. Rivera, he thought. It can't be. After all these years, it just can't be. But deep in his heart, Michael Jordan knew that sometimes impossible things happened, and sometimes they happened for a reason. The Jordan family dining room looked like something from a magazine. A long, wooden table sat in the center, surrounded by comfortable chairs. Paintings of basketball scenes hung on the walls, and a big window showed the beautiful backyard. Sarah quickly set an extra place at the table for Elijah. She put down a shiny plate, a cloth napkin, and real silver forks and knives. Elijah had never eaten with such fancy things before. Please, sit anywhere you'd like, Sarah said with a warm smile. Elijah chose the chair farthest from the head of the table. He didn't want to take anyone's special spot. Marcus sat next to him, still excited about bringing his friend home. Michael walked in slowly and sat at the head of the table. But he wasn't acting like himself. He kept looking at Elijah when he thought no one was watching. His eyes studied the boy's face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Sarah brought out plates of food, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and warm dinner rolls. The smell made Elijah's stomach growl loudly. He put his hand over his belly, embarrassed. Hungry? Sarah asked kindly. Yes, ma'am, Elijah whispered. This looks amazing. It had been 2 days since his last real meal. Yesterday, he had eaten half a sandwich from the school trash can. The day before, the lunch lady had given him an apple when she thought no one was looking. Everyone began eating. Elijah took small bites, trying to make the food last longer. Each bite tasted like heaven. The chicken was soft and juicy. The potatoes were creamy and warm. He had almost forgotten what a real dinner felt like. Marcus talked about basketball practice and school, trying to fill the quiet air. But something felt wrong in the room. His dad was acting strange, and his mom kept giving his dad worried looks. So, Elijah, Sarah said gently, tell us about yourself. Do you live nearby? Elijah's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He looked down at his plate. Kind of, he said quietly. What do your parents do for work? Sarah continued, trying to be friendly. The room got very quiet. Elijah set down his fork and took a deep breath. My mom died when I was 12, he said, in a small voice. She got sick with cancer. Oh, honey, Sarah said, her voice full of sadness. I'm so sorry. And your father? Michael asked suddenly. His voice sounded strange, like he was afraid of the answer. Elijah looked up at the man who had been so nice to him just an hour ago. Now Michael's face looked serious and worried. My dad, Elijah started, then stopped. How could he explain? How could he tell these nice people about the man who used to be his hero? He was in the army, Elijah said slowly. He went to Afghanistan when I was 13. When he came back a year later, he was different. Michael's water glass slipped from his hand and crashed to the floor. Glass pieces scattered everywhere, and water spread across the expensive rug. Michael, Sarah jumped up and grabbed a towel from the kitchen, but Michael didn't move. He just stared at Elijah with wide eyes. Different how? Michael asked, his voice barely louder than a whisper. Elijah felt tears starting in his eyes, but he tried to be brave. He had nightmares every night. He would wake up screaming. He started drinking a lot. He couldn't keep a job because his hands shook all the time. Sarah stopped cleaning and looked at her husband. Michael's face had gone completely white. The doctors said he had something called PTSD, Elijah continued. He tried to get better, but it was too hard. One morning, I woke up and he was gone. He left a note saying I would be better off without him. Michael's chair scraped loudly as he stood up quickly. Excuse me, he said in a shaky voice, and walked out of the room. Dad, Marcus called after him. Confused, Sarah followed Michael into the hallway, leaving the two boys alone at the table. Is your dad okay? Elijah asked quietly. Did I say something wrong? I don't know, Marcus said, looking toward where his parents had gone. He's been acting weird since you said your last name. In the hallway, Sarah found Michael leaning against the wall with his hands over his face. "Michael, what's going on?" she asked, touching his arm gently. Michael looked up at his wife with tears in his eyes. "Sarah, I think I know who his father is." Asterisk, what do you mean? "David Rivera," Michael whispered. "If that boy's father is David Rivera, then—" He stopped and took a shaky breath. "Then he's the son of the man who saved my life." Sarah's eyes grew wide. In all their years of marriage, Michael had never mentioned anyone named David Rivera. "Who is David Rivera?" she asked. Michael looked back toward the dining room, where they could hear Marcus trying to cheer up Elijah. "He's the man who took a bullet for me," Michael said quietly. "And if that's his son in there, then I've been looking for the wrong person all these years." Back in the dining room, Elijah pushed his food around on his plate. Even though it was delicious, he had lost his appetite. He always felt sad when he talked about his father. Asterisk, hey, Marcus said, putting his hand on Elijah's shoulder. "Whatever's going on with my dad, it's not your fault." "Are you sure?" Elijah asked. "I'm sure," Marcus said firmly. "My dad's a good man. If he's acting strange, there's a good reason for it." Elijah nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that his last name meant something important to Michael Jordan, something that might change everything. That night, Michael Jordan couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Sarah slept peacefully beside him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Elijah's face. The boy looked so much like someone from his past that it made his heart hurt. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Michael quietly got out of bed. He walked downstairs to his home office and turned on the small desk lamp. The room was filled with basketball trophies and pictures from his playing days. But tonight, he wasn't thinking about basketball. Michael opened his desk drawer and pulled out an old wooden box. He hadn't looked inside it for years. His hands shook a little as he lifted the lid. Inside were old photos, letters, and military medals that didn't belong to him. At the bottom of the box was what he was looking for, a faded photo from 1995. In the picture, a younger Michael Jordan stood next to a man in an army uniform. Both men were smiling and had their arms around each other's shoulders. They looked like brothers. On the back of the photo, someone had written in blue ink, "Michael Jordan and Sergeant David Rivera, best friends forever, 1995. Michael held the photo with shaking hands. David Rivera had been more than just his bodyguard. He had been like family. Asterisk, Michael remembered the day they first met. It was 1995, and Michael was getting scary letters from fans who wanted to hurt him. The NBA hired David to keep him safe. David was young, only 25, but he was smart and brave. More importantly, he cared about people. "I won't let anything happen to you, MJ," David had promised on his first day. "You have my word." And David had kept that promise in the most incredible way possible. Meanwhile, upstairs in the guest bedroom, Elijah couldn't sleep either. The bed was too soft, and the room was too quiet. For weeks, he had been sleeping on gym mats with the sounds of the city outside. This felt like a dream he might wake up from. Marcus had given him some of his old clothes, a clean t-shirt and pajama, pants that actually fit. It felt strange to wear clothes that belonged to someone else, but also nice. They smelled like fabric softener and kindness. Elijah got up and looked out the window at the big backyard. There was a swimming pool and a basketball court with real lights. He had never lived anywhere with so much space that a soft knock on his door made him turn around. "Come in," he said quietly. Marcus peeked his head inside. "Can't sleep either?" "The bed's too comfortable," Elijah said with a small smile. Marcus laughed and sat down on the edge of the bed. "That's a problem I've never had." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said. "Sure. Why did you tell me you were homeless? You could have made up a story." Elijah thought about the question. "Because you were nice to me when other people weren't. You deserve the truth." Marcus nodded. "My dad always says that honest people are the bravest people." "Your dad seems like a good man," Elijah said. "But I think I upset him tonight." "He wasn't upset," Marcus said quickly. "He was surprised." "There's a difference." Asterisk, surprised about what? Marcus shrugged. "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." Downstairs, Michael was still looking through his box of memories. He found more photos of David at basketball games, at family dinners, at the hospital after the shooting. Michael would never forget that day. It happened during a public appearance at a shopping mall. A man with a gun had pushed through the crowd, screaming Michael's name. David saw the danger first and threw himself between Michael and the gunman. The bullet hit David in the shoulder instead of Michael's chest. "Why did you do that?" Michael had asked David in the hospital. "Because that's what friends do," David had replied. "They protect each other." After David recovered, he left his job as Michael's bodyguard to join the military. He said he wanted to serve his country before he got too old. Michael had been proud of his friend's choice, but also sad to see him go. "Take care of yourself, MJ," David had said at their goodbye dinner. "And if I ever have a son, I want him to meet you someday. I want him to know what a real hero looks like." Michael's hands trembled as he remembered those words. If I ever have a son. David had talked about wanting children all the time. He said he would name his son Elijah, after the prophet in the Bible, because he wanted his boy to be strong and faithful. That Michael's heart started beating fast. Could it really be possible? Could the homeless boy sleeping upstairs be David Rivera's son? The next morning, Michael made an important phone call. He called his private investigator, a man who had helped him with business problems for years. "I need you to find someone," Michael said into the phone. "Who are we looking for, Mr. Jordan?" "David Rivera. He's a military veteran, probably around 45 years old now. Last time I saw him was in 1998. Any idea where he might be?" Michael's voice got quiet. "Somewhere in Chicago, I hope. But I'm afraid he might be in trouble." Asterisk, what kind of trouble? "The kind that makes a good father leave his son behind." Sarah walked into the office and heard the end of the conversation. She had never heard Michael mention David Rivera before last night. "Who is David Rivera?" she asked when Michael hung up the phone. Michael looked at his wife with tears in his eyes. "He's the man who saved my life, Sarah. And I think the boy upstairs might be his son." "How can you be sure?" Michael showed her the photo. "David always said he wanted to name his son Elijah. He said it would be a strong name for a strong boy." Sarah looked at the photo of the two young men smiling together. "What happened to him?" "I don't know," Michael said sadly. "But I'm going to find out. And if David Rivera is in trouble, I'm going to help him, just like he helped me." Upstairs, Elijah was getting dressed for school. He put on the clean clothes Marcus had given him and looked at himself in the mirror. For the first time in months, he looked like a normal teenager. Asterisk, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. Something that would change his life forever. He just didn't know if it would be good or bad. After Elijah and Marcus left for school, Michael sat Sarah down at the kitchen table. She could see that her husband needed to tell her something important. His hands were shaking slightly as he poured 2 cups of coffee. "I've never told you this story," Michael began, looking into his coffee cup. "I thought that part of my life was over forever." Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. "Tell me now." Michael took a deep breath. "In 1995, things got really scary for me. I was getting letters from people who wanted to hurt me. Some fans became too crazy. The NBA was worried about my safety." He got up and brought the wooden box to the table. He pulled out more photos and spread them in front of Sarah. "This is when they hired David Rivera," Michael said, pointing to a picture of a young man in a suit. "He was 25 years old, just out of the Marines. He was supposed to be my bodyguard, but he became so much more." Sarah looked at the photos. David Rivera was tall and strong, with kind eyes and a serious face. In every picture, he stood close to Michael, always watching for danger. "He wasn't just protecting my body," Michael continued. "He was protecting my family, my peace of mind, my whole life. But David never made it feel like work. He made it feel like friendship." Michael showed Sarah a photo of David at a family barbecue, laughing with Michael's parents. Another showed David teaching young Michael how to change a tire. "He came to family dinners every Sunday," Michael said with a smile. "Your mom loved him. She always made extra food because she said David was too skinny." "He sounds wonderful," Sarah said softly. "He was. David taught me that being strong wasn't just about basketball. It was about caring for people and standing up for what's right." Michael's voice got quieter. David talked about his future all the time. He wanted to get married and have children. He had names picked out and everything. "What names?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. For a boy, he wanted Elijah. For a girl, he wanted Grace. Michael looked at his wife with tears in his eyes. He said Elijah was a prophet who never gave up, even when things got hard. He wanted his son to be like that. Sarah felt her heart breaking. "So when you heard that name last night, I knew it couldn't be a coincidence." Michael finished. "David talked about having a son named Elijah for 3 whole years. And now there's a boy named Elijah Rivera sleeping in our guest room. Michael pulled out a newspaper clipping from 1997. The headline read, "Bodyguard saves basketball star's life." "This is the day that changed everything," Michael said that he told Sarah about the shopping mall appearance that went wrong. A man with a gun had pushed through the crowd of fans. David saw the danger before anyone else did. The man was screaming, "My name," and pointing the gun right at me, Michael said, his voice shaking with the memory. I froze. I couldn't move. But David didn't hesitate for even a second. Michael showed Sarah a photo from the hospital. David was lying in a bed with bandages on his shoulder, but he was smiling. Michael sat next to him, holding his friend's hand. Asterisk, "The bullet hit David instead of me," Michael said. "The doctor said if he hadn't moved so fast, I would have died that day." "Oh my goodness," Sarah whispered. When I asked him why he did it, David looked at me like I was crazy. He said, "That's what friends do, MJ. They protect each other." Like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Michael wiped tears from his eyes. David spent 2 weeks in the hospital. I stayed with him every day. We talked about everything. Our dreams, our fears, our hopes for the future. What happened after he got better? That's when he told me he wanted to join the army, Michael said. He said protecting me had shown him that he wanted to serve his country. He wanted to be a soldier. Michael showed Sarah the last photo in the box. It was taken at David's going-away party in 1998. David was wearing his new army uniform, and Michael had his arm around his friend's shoulder. "I was so proud of him," Michael said, "but also scared. I knew the army would be dangerous." "Did you stay in touch?" Michael's face fell. At first, yes. He sent letters and photos from his training. But then he got sent overseas, and the letters stopped coming. "When was the last time you heard from him?" 2006, Michael said quietly. He sent a short letter saying he was coming home from Afghanistan. He sounded different in that letter. Tired. Sad. He said he had some things to work through, but that he would call me soon. But he never called. Never. I tried to find him, but David Rivera is a common name, and I didn't know he had gotten married or had a son. Michael looked at Sarah with desperate eyes. What if he needed my help and I wasn't there for him? Sarah squeezed her husband's hand. "You couldn't have known. But I should have tried harder," Michael said. "David saved my life, and when he needed me, I failed him." At school, Elijah was having trouble concentrating on his classes. He kept thinking about the strange dinner at the Jordan house. Why had Mr. Jordan acted so weird when he heard his last name? During lunch, Marcus sat with Elijah in the cafeteria. "My parents were talking about you this morning," Marcus said. Asterisk, Elijah's stomach dropped. "Am I in trouble? Do they want me to leave?" No, nothing like that," Marcus said quickly. "It's just, I think my dad knows something about your family." "What do you mean?" Marcus lowered his voice. "I heard him on the phone with someone. He was asking them to find a man named David Rivera." Elijah's fork clattered to his tray. "He's looking for my dad?" "I think so. But Elijah, why would my dad be looking for your father? How would he even know him?" Elijah stared at his friend. "I have no idea." After school, Coach Williams asked Elijah to stay behind. The coach was a kind man who noticed when his students were struggling. "Everything okay, son?" Coach Williams asked. "You seem distracted today." Elijah didn't know how much to say. "I'm staying with a friend's family right now. It's complicated." "The Jordans?" Elijah nodded. Coach Williams smiled. "Michael Jordan is a good man. If he's helping you, you're in the right place." "Did you know him when he played basketball?" Asterisk, "I watched every game," Coach Williams said. But what made him special wasn't just his talent. It was his heart. He never forgot where he came from, and he never stopped caring about people. Elijah thought about those words as he and Marcus walked home. When they got to the Jordan house, they found Michael waiting for them in the living room. "Boys, can you sit down?" Michael said, "I need to tell you something important." Elijah's heart started beating fast. This was it. This was the moment that would change everything. "Elijah," Michael said gently, "I think I knew your father." Elijah felt like the world had stopped spinning. He stared at Michael Jordan with wide eyes, not sure he had heard correctly. "You knew my dad?" Elijah whispered. Michael nodded slowly. "I think so, but I need to be sure before I tell you more." Marcus looked back and forth between his father and his friend. "Dad, what's going on? Your father's name is David Rivera, right?" Michael asked Elijah. "And he was in the army?" "Yes, sir," Elijah said, his voice shaking. "But how could you know him?" He never told me he knew any famous people. Michael's heart ached for the confused boy. Sometimes adults don't tell children everything about their past. Sometimes they're trying to protect them. Sarah came into the living room and sat down next to Michael. She had been crying, and her eyes were red. "Boys," she said gently, "Mr. Jordan is going to help us find out more about Elijah's father. But it might take some time." "What do you mean, find out more?" Elijah asked. Fear crept into his voice. "Is my dad in trouble?" Michael chose his words carefully. "I don't know yet, son, but I have someone looking for him right now." Just then, Michael's phone rang. It was his private investigator. "Excuse me for a moment," Michael said, stepping into the hallway to take the call. "Mr. Jordan, the investigator's voice was serious. I found David Rivera." Michael's heart started pounding. "Where is he?" "He's in a veterans hospital in Detroit. He's been there for 6 months." Michael felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. "A hospital? What's wrong with him?" According to his medical records, he has severe PTSD, depression, and some health problems related to alcohol use. "Mr. Jordan, this man is in really bad shape." Michael leaned against the wall for support. His strong, brave friend was broken and alone in a hospital 3 hours away. Does he know his son is missing? Michael asked quietly. "The hospital says he rarely talks to anyone. He's listed as having no family contacts. I don't think he knows where his son is." Michael closed his eyes. "Can I visit him?" "Visiting hours are from 2 to 6 every day. But Mr. Jordan, you should know, the staff says he doesn't usually want to see people." After hanging up, Michael stood in the hallway for a few minutes. He needed to decide what to tell Elijah. The truth might be too hard for a 16-year-old boy to handle. When he returned to the living room, 3 pairs of eyes were watching him expectantly. "Well?" Sarah asked softly. Michael sat down and looked directly at Elijah. "I found your father." Elijah jumped up from his chair. "Where is he? Is he okay? Can I see him?" "Slow down, son," Michael said gently. "He's in Detroit, and he's not well." Elijah's face went pale. "What do you mean, not well? Is he dying?" "No, he's not dying," Michael said quickly. "But he's in a hospital getting help for some problems that came from the war." Elijah sat back down heavily. "The nightmares," he said quietly. "And the drinking. That's why he left, isn't it?" Michael nodded. "I think your father left because he thought you would be better off without him. But he was wrong about that." Tears started rolling down Elijah's cheeks. "Can we go see him?" Michael looked at Sarah, then back at Elijah. "I think I should go first. Alone. I need to talk to him and see how he's doing." "But he's my dad," Elijah said, his voice getting louder. "I have the right to see him." "You do," Michael agreed. "But sometimes when people are very sick, they need time to get ready for visitors. Especially visitors they love very much." Marcus put his hand on Elijah's shoulder. "My dad will bring him home," he said confidently. "Won't you, Dad?" Michael wished he could make that promise. But he didn't know what condition David was in or if David would even want to come home. "I'm going to try," Michael said honestly. "But Elijah, you need to understand that your father has been very sick for a long time. Getting better might take a while." Meanwhile, at school, Mrs. Chun, the counselor, was getting worried. She had been trying to reach Elijah's emergency contacts for days, but all the phone numbers were disconnected. She decided to make a home visit to the address on his school records. When she arrived at the apartment building, she found an empty unit. The landlord told her that David Rivera had stopped paying rent 4 months ago and had disappeared one night with just a suitcase. "Did he say where he was going?" Mrs. Chin asked. "Nope," the landlord said. "Just left his son's stuff behind." I felt bad for the kid, but what could I do? Mrs. Chin realized that Elijah had been truly homeless and on his own for months. She needed to contact social services immediately. That evening, Mrs. Chin knocked on the Jordan family's front door. Sarah answered, surprised to see a woman she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Jordan? I'm Mrs. Chun, Elijah's school counselor. I need to speak with you about his situation." Sarah invited her in, and they sat in the living room with Michael and the boys. "I've been trying to reach Elijah's father for weeks," Mrs. Chin explained. "Today I discovered that he abandoned their apartment months ago." "Elijah, how long have you been on your own?" Elijah looked down at his hands. "Since February," he said quietly. Mrs. Chin's eyes grew wide. "That's 4 months. Where have you been living?" "Different places," Elijah mumbled. "The park, the school gym, sometimes under bridges." Sarah gasped and put her hand over her mouth. Marcus stared at his friend in shock. He had no idea Elijah had been living on the streets for so long. "Elijah, why didn't you tell anyone?" Mrs. Chen asked gently. "Because I knew they would put me in foster care," Elijah said. "And I thought my dad might come back." Mrs. Chun turned to Michael and Sarah. "I'm grateful that you've opened your home to Elijah, but we need to discuss his legal situation. He can't stay here permanently without proper guardianship papers." Michael's jaw tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means we need to contact social services. Elijah needs to be placed in official foster care until we can locate his father or find other family members." "No," Elijah said, jumping up. "Please don't make me leave. I'll be good, I promise." Sarah started crying. In just a few days, Elijah had become like a son to her. "How long do we have?" Michael asked. "I have to file a report by tomorrow," Mrs. Chun said sadly. "After that, social services will take over." After Mrs. Chun left, the Jordan family sat in stunned silence. "We can't let them take him away," Marcus said fiercely. "He belongs here with us." Michael looked at his wife and son, then at Elijah, who was trying not to cry. "No one is taking you anywhere," Michael said firmly. "I'm going to Detroit tomorrow, and I'm bringing your father home." "What if he won't come?" Elijah asked. Michael thought about his old friend lying in a hospital bed, sick and alone. He thought about the brave soldier who had once saved his life. "Then I'll remind him that he has something worth fighting for," Michael said. "I'll remind him that he has a son who needs him." But even as he said the words, Michael wondered if it would be enough. How do you convince a broken man to put himself back together? And what if David Rivera didn't want to be found? The next morning, Michael drove to Detroit alone. The 3-hour drive felt like the longest trip of his life. He kept thinking about the last time he had seen David Rivera, strong, proud, and full of hope for the future. Now his friend was broken and alone in a hospital, the Veterans Medical Center in Detroit was a large, gray building that looked sad against the cloudy sky. Michael parked his car and sat for a moment, trying to prepare himself for what he might find inside. The front desk. A tired-looking nurse looked up when he approached. "I'm here to see David Rivera," Michael said quietly. The nurse checked her computer screen. "Are you family?" Michael hesitated. Technically, they weren't related by blood, but in his heart, David had always been like a brother. "I'm his best friend," Michael said simply. The nurse studied Michael's face for a moment. Something in his eyes must have convinced her that he was telling the truth. "Room 247, she said. "But sir, you should know, Mr. Rivera doesn't usually want visitors. He's been here 6 months, and you're the first person to ask for him." Michael's heart broke a little more. 6 months, and no one had come to see David. "What can you tell me about his condition?" Michael asked. The nurse looked around, then leaned closer. "He has severe PTSD from his time in Afghanistan. He also struggles with depression and has some health problems from drinking too much. But the worst part is that he's given up hope." "What do you mean?" He barely talks to anyone. He doesn't participate in group therapy. He just sits by his window all day, staring at nothing. It's like he's waiting to disappear." Michael thanked the nurse and took the elevator to the 2nd floor. The hallway was long and quiet, with pale green walls and the smell of disinfectant. He found room 247 and knocked softly on the door. "Come in," came a voice so quiet Michael almost missed it. Michael opened the door and stepped inside. The room was small and plain, with one bed, one chair, and one window. Sitting in the chair, looking out at the parking lot, was David Rivera, but this wasn't the David that Michael remembered. The man by the window was thin, almost skinny. His hair, which used to be thick and black, was now gray and uncombed. His shoulders were hunched forward like he was carrying an invisible weight. His clothes hung loose on his small frame. "David," Michael said softly. David turned slowly toward the voice. For a moment, his face showed no expression at all. Then his eyes grew wide with shock. "MJ," he whispered, "is that really you?" Michael walked across the room and sat down on the bed, facing his old friend. Up close, he could see how much David had changed. His face was lined with worry and pain. His hands shook slightly as they rested on his lap. "Hello, old friend," Michael said, trying to keep his voice steady. David stared at him like he was seeing a ghost. "I thought I'd never see you again," he said, his voice rough and hoarse. "I've been looking for you," Michael said. "For years, actually. I just didn't know where to start." David laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Well, you found me. This is what's left of the man who used to protect you." Michael looked into his friend's eyes and saw so much pain that it made his own chest hurt. "David, I need to tell you something important," Michael said. David shook his head. "Let me guess. You want to help me get back on my feet? Save me like I once saved you? Make me feel better about what a failure I've become. Your son needs you," Michael said quietly. The words hit David like a physical blow. All the color drained from his face, and his hands began to shake harder. "My son," David whispered. "How do you know about Elijah?" "Because he's been living in my house for the past week." David stared at Michael in complete shock. Then, without warning, he started to cry. Not just tears, but deep, heartbroken sobs that shook his whole body. "No," David said through his tears. "No, that can't be true. Elijah is safe. Elijah is with his grandmother in California." Michael's heart sank. "David, what grandmother?" "Elijah told me his mother died when he was 12. David's crying got harder. "I made that up. I told him I was sending him to his grandmother so he wouldn't try to follow me. I thought it would be easier for him to hate me than to worry about me." "David," Michael said gently, "Elijah has been homeless for 4 months. He's been sleeping in parks and school gymnasiums. He's been eating out of trash cans." David's face crumpled completely. He put his hands over his face and cried like his heart was breaking. "I failed him," David sobbed. "I failed everyone. The war broke something inside me, MJ. I couldn't sleep without nightmares. I couldn't stop drinking. I couldn't be the father he needed." Michael moved from the bed to kneel beside David's chair. He put his hand on his friend's shoulder. "You're not broken, David," Michael said firmly. "You're hurt. There's a difference." "No, you don't understand," David said, looking up with red, swollen eyes. "I'm not the man you remember. That David Rivera died in Afghanistan. I watched my friends get blown up by bombs. I held dying soldiers in my arms. I came home, but I left my soul over there." Michael reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. He showed David some photos of Elijah that he had taken during the past week. "Look at your son," Michael said. "Really look at him." David stared at the pictures, his hands trembling as he held the phone. There was Elijah sitting at the dinner table, smiling at something Marcus had said. There was Elijah shooting basketball with Marcus in the backyard. There was Elijah drawing a picture, his tongue sticking out in concentration. "He draws pictures," Michael said softly. "Beautiful pictures. He's incredibly talented. And David, he never stopped believing you'd come back." David looked at one particular drawing on the phone, a picture of a soldier and a young boy playing catch in a park. "He still draws me," David whispered. "He draws you because he still loves you," Michael said. "He just doesn't know how to find you." David wiped his eyes and looked at Michael. What kind of man abandons his own child? The kind of man who thinks he's protecting that child, Michael said. The kind of man who loves his son so much that he's willing to sacrifice his own happiness for what he thinks is best. "But I was wrong," David said. "Yes, you were wrong," Michael agreed. "But being wrong doesn't make you a bad father. It makes you human." David was quiet for a long time, still looking at the pictures of Elijah. "Is he okay?" David finally asked. "Really okay? He's smart, kind, and brave," Michael said. "Just like his father was. Just like his father still is, underneath all this pain." "I don't know how to be a father anymore," David admitted. "I don't even know how to be a person anymore." Michael thought about all the times David had encouraged him during their friendship. Now it was his turn to be strong for David. "Then let me help you remember," Michael said. "Let me help you find your way back to the man Elijah needs." David looked out the window again, but this time his expression was different. Instead of hopelessness, there was something else in his eyes. It was hope. "He really wants to see me?" David asked quietly. "More than anything in the world," Michael said. "But David, you have to want to see him too. You have to want to get better." David closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, Michael saw a tiny spark of the old David Rivera, the brave soldier who had once thrown himself in front of a bullet. "What do I need to do?" David asked. Michael looked at his old friend with a mixture of hope and worry. David was asking the right question, but getting better wouldn't be easy. "First," Michael said carefully, "you need to want to get well for yourself, not just for Elijah." Recovery has to come from inside you. David nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that for months. But every time I tried to get better, I felt like I didn't deserve it. Why? Because good fathers don't abandon their children, David said, his voice full of shame. Because heroes don't run away when things get hard. Michael sat back down on the bed. David, do you remember what you told me after you saved my life? David shook his head. You said that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared. I remember, David whispered. Asterisk. Well, getting help is the brave thing to do now, Michael said. Fighting for your health is the right thing to do for Elijah. David was quiet for a long time. Then he pressed the call button next to his bed. A few minutes later, a nurse came in. Can I help you, Mr. Rivera? I want to talk to my doctor, David said. I want to know about programs that can help me get better. The nurse smiled, the first real smile David had seen in months. I'll get Dr. Martinez right away. While they waited, Michael called Sarah to check on things at home. How is he? Sarah asked quietly. Broken, but not beyond repair, Michael said. He wants to see Elijah, but he's scared. What about the social services situation? I'm going to stay here for a few days, Michael decided. I want to help David get started on the right path before I come home. What should I tell Elijah? Michael thought about the boy who was probably sitting by the phone, hoping for good news. Tell him his father is alive and that he loves him very much. Tell him that his dad is sick, but he's getting help. Asterisk. And if Elijah asks when he can see him, tell him soon, Michael said. Tell him very soon. Dr. Martinez arrived and sat down with David and Michael. She was a kind woman with gray hair and gentle eyes. Mr. Rivera, I'm glad you're ready to participate in your recovery, she said. What changed your mind? David looked at Michael, then back at the doctor. I found out that I have something worth fighting for. Dr. Martinez smiled. What kind of help are you looking for? Everything, David said firmly. I want to stop drinking. I want to learn how to deal with my nightmares. I want to be the father my son deserves. That's going to take time and hard work, Dr. Martinez warned. Recovery isn't a straight line. Some days will be better than others. I understand, David said, but I'm ready to try. The doctor explained the different programs available. There was group therapy for veterans with PTSD. There were classes about managing depression and anxiety. There was a program specifically for fathers who wanted to reconnect with their children. How long will it take? David asked. That depends on you, Dr. Martinez said. Some people need a few months. Others need longer. The important thing is that you don't give up. Asterisk. David looked at Michael. Will you help me? Every step of the way, Michael promised. Meanwhile, back in Chicago, Elijah was having the hardest day of his life. Mrs. Chun had called early that morning to say that a social worker would be coming to pick him up at noon. I'm sorry, honey, Sarah said, hugging Elijah tight. We're fighting this, but the law says you have to go into official foster care until your father is found. Elijah sat on his bed, the bed that had become his safe place, and packed his few belongings back into his small backpack. Marcus sat beside him, both boys trying not to cry. This isn't fair, Marcus said angrily. You belong here with us. Maybe it's for the best, Elijah said quietly, though he didn't really believe it. I don't want to cause problems for your family. You're not causing problems, Marcus said. You're part of our family now. Just then, Sarah's phone rang. It was Michael. Any news? She asked hopefully. David is checking himself into an intensive treatment program, Michael said. It's a big step. How long will it take? Asterisk, the doctor says at least a month, maybe more. But Sarah, he's motivated now. He wants to get better for Elijah. Sarah felt tears in her eyes. The social worker will be here in an hour to take Elijah. What? Already? Mrs. Chin couldn't delay it any longer. The law is the law. Michael was quiet for a moment. Put Elijah on the phone. Sarah found Elijah in his room, holding his backpack like it was the only thing he owned in the world. Elijah, honey, Mr. Jordan wants to talk to you. Elijah took the phone with shaking hands. Hello, son, I want you to know that I found your father, Michael said gently. Elijah's heart started pounding. Is he okay? Can I see him? He's alive, and he loves you very much, Michael said. But he's been very sick, and he needs some time to get better. How long? Elijah asked, his voice breaking. The phone call between David and Elijah lasted 2 hours. They both cried. They both said, "I'm sorry," more times than they could count. And when it was over, both father and son felt something they hadn't felt in a long time: hope. But David knew that one phone call wasn't enough. He needed to prove to his son that he was truly getting better. More importantly, he needed to prove it to himself. The next morning, David met with Dr. Martinez for what would be their most important session yet. "How did the phone call go?" she asked. David smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "It was the best 2 hours I've had in years." "What did you talk about?" "Everything," David said. "His school, his art, his time on the streets, his stay with the Jordan family. And I told him about my treatment, about how I'm learning to deal with my problems." "How did he react to that?" David's smile faded a little. He was glad I was getting help, but I could hear the fear in his voice. "He's scared I'll leave again." "Are you going to leave again?" "Never," David said firmly. "But how do I prove that to him?" Dr. Martinez leaned forward. "David, you've been in treatment for 3 weeks. You've made incredible progress. I think it's time to talk about the next step." "What do you mean?" "I mean, it's time to consider leaving the hospital and continuing your treatment as an outpatient. You're ready to start rebuilding your life." David felt excited and terrified at the same time. "Where would I go? I don't have a home anymore." Asterisk, "That's something we need to figure out," Dr. Martinez said. "But David, your son needs stability. If you're going to be his father again, you need to be able to provide a safe, stable home." David thought about his old apartment, which the landlord had probably rented to someone else months ago. He thought about his job, which he had lost when his drinking got too bad. He thought about all the pieces of his life that had fallen apart. "I don't know how to start over," he admitted. "You don't have to start completely over," Dr. Martinez said gently. "You have skills, you have experience, and you have people who care about you. Sometimes starting over is really about putting the pieces back together in a new way." That afternoon, David called Michael with a question that had been on his mind for days. "MJ, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." "Always," Michael said. "Do you think I can really do this? Do you think I can be the father Elijah needs?" Michael was quiet for a moment. "David, do you remember what you told me the day before you saved my life?" "No, what?" "We were talking about pressure, about how scary it was to have people depending on you. You said that being afraid doesn't make you weak, it makes you careful. And being careful makes you strong." Asterisk, David remembered that conversation. It was the day before the shooting at the mall. "You were afraid that day too," Michael continued. "But you still threw yourself in front of that bullet. You still protected me, even when you were scared." "This is different," David said. "This is about being a father." "No, it's not different," Michael said firmly. "It's about protecting someone you love. It's about being brave when it matters most. You've already proven you can do that." Meanwhile, in Chicago, Elijah was having his own conversation with Mrs. Patterson about the future. "How do you feel about possibly going home to your father?" she asked as they prepared dinner together. Elijah chopped vegetables slowly, thinking about his answer. "Excited, scared, happy, worried, all at the same time." "That's normal," Mrs. Patterson said. "Big changes bring big feelings." "What if he's not ready? What if I go back and he gets sick again?" Mrs. Patterson stopped stirring the soup and looked at Elijah. "Honey, there are no guarantees in life. But from what I hear, your father is working very hard to get better. But what if it's not enough? Then you'll figure it out together," she said simply. "That's what families do. They figure things out together." That evening, Elijah called Marcus to talk about his fears. "I'm scared to hope too much," Elijah admitted. "What if I get excited about going home and then it doesn't work out?" Asterisk, "But what if it does work out?" Marcus asked. "What if you spend all this time being scared and then everything turns out great?" Elijah thought about that. "I never thought about it that way. My dad says that hope is like a muscle," Marcus said. "The more you use it, the stronger it gets." Back in Detroit, David was preparing for his biggest challenge yet. Dr. Martinez had arranged for him to spend a weekend outside the hospital, staying in a halfway house for veterans. It would be his first time living independently since he had checked into treatment. "This is a test," Dr. Martinez explained. "A test to see if you're ready to manage your recovery in the real world." Asterisk, David packed his few belongings into a small suitcase. As he was getting ready to leave, his phone rang. It was Elijah. "Dad, I heard you're getting out of the hospital for a few days." "Just for the weekend," David said. "It's kind of like practice." For real life. Are you nervous? David smiled. His son knew him so well. Very nervous, but also excited. Dad, yes, son. Asterisk, I'm proud of you. Those 4 words meant more to David than any medal or award he had ever received. Thank you, Elijah. That means everything to me. The halfway house was a small, clean building with 6 bedrooms and a shared kitchen. David's roommate was a veteran, named Carlos, who had been in recovery for 2 years. First time out, Carlos asked as David unpacked his suitcase. Yeah, I'm pretty scared. Asterisk, Carlos laughed. Good. Being scared means you're taking this seriously. That first night, David lay in bed listening to the sounds of the city outside his window. For the first time in months, he wasn't in a hospital room. For the first time in years, he wasn't drunk or having nightmares. He was just a man, lying in a bed, thinking about his son. The next morning, David called Michael with an update. How was your first night? Michael asked. Hard, but good. David said. I didn't sleep much, but not because of nightmares. I was just thinking. About what? About Elijah. About what kind of home I want to make for him. Asterisk, Michael smiled on the other end of the phone. What kind of home do you want to make? David looked out the window at the busy Detroit street. A place where he feels safe. A place where he can draw and dream and be a kid. A place where he never has to worry about me leaving again. That sounds like a good kind of home, Michael said. MJ, I need to ask you something else. What's that? When I'm ready to take Elijah back, would you help me find a job? I know I don't deserve your help after everything that's happened, but David, Michael interrupted. You saved my life. Helping you find a job is the least I can do. Thank you, David said, his voice thick with emotion. But David, I want to offer you something more than just help finding a job. What do you mean? Michael had been thinking about this for days. I'm starting a new program through my foundation. It's for at-risk kids who need mentorship and support. I need someone to run it, someone who understands struggle, someone who knows what it's like to fall down and get back up. David was quiet. For a long moment. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance to help kids like Elijah. Kids who need someone to believe in them. Asterisk, David felt tears in his eyes. You would trust me with something that important? I've always trusted you with important things, Michael said. The question is, do you trust yourself? David looked around. The halfway house. At the other veterans who were working hard to rebuild their lives. He thought about his son, who was waiting for him to come home. He thought about all the kids out there who needed someone to show them that it was possible to overcome difficult things. Asterisk, yes, David said quietly. I think I do. That night, David called Elijah with the best news he'd had in years. Son, I think I know what I want to do with my life, he said. What's that, Dad? I want to help kids who are going through hard times. Kids like you, who need someone to believe in them. Elijah was quiet for a moment. That sounds perfect for you, Dad. Why do you say that? Because you always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. Asterisk, as David hung up the phone, he realized something important. Recovery wasn't just about getting better for himself or even for his son. It was about becoming the kind of person who could help others heal too. And for the first time since he'd come home from the war, David Rivera felt like he had a purpose. Worth fighting. 4.3 weeks later, David Rivera walked out of the Detroit Veterans Center carrying a small bag and a certificate of completion. He had successfully finished the intensive treatment program. More importantly, he had learned how to manage his PTSD, his depression, and his drinking problem. Asterisk, but the biggest test was still ahead of him. Michael was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his car with a smile on his face. When he saw David walking toward him, he felt proud of his old friend. David looked different, healthier, stronger, more like the man Michael remembered. Mr. Rivera, the reporter asked, what would you say to other parents who are struggling with PTSD or addiction? David looked directly into the camera. I would say that asking for help isn't giving up. It's the bravest thing you can do. And I would tell them that their children need them to get better, not to be perfect. And Elijah, the reporter turned to the 17-year-old. What advice do you have for kids who feel like they have no hope? Elijah thought carefully before answering. I would tell them that feeling hopeless doesn't mean there is no hope. Sometimes hope comes from the most unexpected places. For me, it came from a friend who invited me to dinner and a man who never gave up on finding my dad. After the interview, the Rivera family and the Jordan family gathered at their favorite restaurant to celebrate the opening of the new center. It had become a tradition to mark important occasions together. I have an announcement, Michael said, standing up with his glass of soda. Everyone looked at him expectantly. Sarah and I have been talking, and we've decided to do something we should have done a long time ago. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out some official-looking papers. David and Elijah Rivera, we would like to formally adopt you into our family. David's mouth fell open. What? Not legally, Sarah said quickly, but officially. We want you to know that you're not just friends to us, you're family. Michael handed David a certificate that read, "The Jordan Rivera family, united by love, strengthened by friendship, bonded forever." David started crying right there in the restaurant. MJ, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Marcus said with a huge grin. I've always wanted a big brother. Elijah laughed and wiped his own tears. Does this mean I get two families now? It means you get one big family, Sarah said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. Later that evening, David and Elijah walked through their neighborhood, talking about the day's events. The small apartment where they had started their new life together was now decorated with Elijah's artwork and photos of all the kids they had helped. Dad, Elijah said as they sat on a bench in the local park, do you ever think about what would have happened if Mr. Jordan hadn't found us? David looked at his son, who was now almost as tall as he was. I try not to think about that. I prefer to think about what did happen. What do you think Mom would say about all this? David smiled and looked up at the stars. I think she would say that we proved her right. About what? She always believed that broken things could be made beautiful again if you put them back together with love. Elijah nodded thoughtfully. We were pretty broken, weren't we? We were, David agreed. But look at us now. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching other families walk through the park, parents pushing strollers, kids playing on swings, teenagers laughing with their friends. Dad, yeah, I want to tell you something important. David turned to face his son. What is it? When you left 2 years ago, I thought it was because I wasn't good enough. I thought if I had been a better son, you would have stayed. David's heart broke. Elijah, you were perfect. You were always perfect. I left because I was sick, not because of anything you did. I know that now, Elijah said. But I needed to tell you what I was thinking back then. Thank you for trusting me with that, David said softly. Dad, yes. I forgive you. Completely. And I want you to forgive yourself too. David had been working on forgiving himself in therapy for over a year, but hearing those words from his son made something shift. Inside his heart, I'm learning to, David said. Every day, I'm learning to. As they walked home, they passed the community center where they would spend the next day helping more kids find hope and healing. The building stood like a beacon in the neighborhood, its windows reflecting the streetlights like stars. You know what I realized today? Elijah said as they climbed the stairs to their apartment. What's that? Mr. Jordan was wrong about one thing. David unlocked their front door. What was he wrong about? He said I reminded him of someone he used to know. But I don't think that's why he helped me. Why do you think he helped you? Elijah smiled and hugged his father goodnight. I think he helped me because that's what good people do. They help because it's right, not because they expect something back. That's very wise, David said, hugging his son tight. I learned it from you, Elijah said. Both times. Both times. Before you left, you taught me that love means protecting people. After you came back, you taught me that love means fighting to become better. David felt tears in his eyes as he watched his son head to his bedroom. Elijah paused in his doorway. Dad. Yes, son. Tomorrow, can we start planning the summer art camp for the kids? Absolutely, David said. We can start planning anything you want. I want to call it Creating Light, Elijah said. Because that's what art does. It takes dark experiences and turns them into something bright. After Elijah went to bed, David sat in his living room and looked around at their home. The walls were covered with Elijah's paintings, some from before David left, some from his time on the streets, and many from their year of healing together. One painting in particular caught his eye. It showed a soldier and a boy walking together on a bright path, with shadows behind them, but sunlight ahead. At the bottom, Elijah had written, "For Dad, we made it home." David picked up his phone and called Michael. "Did I wake you?" David asked when his friend answered. "Nope, just reading." "What's up?" "I wanted to thank you," David said, "for everything. For finding Elijah, for finding me, for never giving up on either of us." "David, you don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do. You saved my life twice. Once with your body and once with your heart." Michael was quiet for a moment. "You know what, David? You saved mine too." "How?" "You reminded me what real friendship looks like. You showed me that the most important victories don't happen on basketball courts. They happen when we help each other heal." After they hung up, David walked to Elijah's room and peeked inside. His son was sleeping peacefully, no longer the scared, homeless boy who had once slept in gymnasiums and parks. David thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. The war, the trauma, the addiction, the abandonment, the homelessness, the finding, the healing, the rebuilding. That it had been the hardest journey of his life, but also the most important one. Because it had led them home. Not just to an apartment or a city, but to each other. And in learning to heal themselves, they had discovered how to help others heal too. David turned off the lights and headed to his own room, no longer afraid of the dark. Because he had learned something important. Even in the deepest darkness, people could create light for each other. And sometimes, that light grew so bright that it illuminated the way home for everyone who had lost their path. As he drifted off to sleep, David smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to help kids find their own way home. Just like Marcus Jordan had helped Elijah find his. Just like Michael Jordan had helped David find his way back to himself. Just like love had helped them all find their way back to each other. The Rivera Family Center for Second Chances now serves over 500 children annually across 3 locations in Chicago. David Rivera is the Executive Director of Youth Services for the Jordan Foundation, and his innovative programs have been replicated in 12 other cities. Elijah Rivera graduated as valedictorian of his high school class and received a full scholarship to study art therapy. He continues to mentor teenagers and plans to open his own therapeutic art center after college. Marcus Jordan and Elijah Rivera remain best friends and business partners, having started a nonprofit organization that provides art supplies to homeless shelters across the country. Michael and Sarah Jordan consider David and Elijah their family, and the two families spend every holiday and major life event together. The original apartment where David and Elijah rebuilt their lives has been turned into a transitional housing unit for homeless teenagers, with a plaque that reads, "Sometimes the smallest spaces hold the biggest dreams." And in schools across Chicago, children learn that everyone deserves a second chance. Everyone has something beautiful to offer the world, and sometimes the most unexpected friendships become the most important families. Most importantly, they learn that love is stronger than fear, hope is stronger than despair, and that even the most broken people can be made whole again when they choose to help each other heal. And that's how one simple act of kindness, a teenager bringing home a friend who needed help, changed 3 families forever. It reminds us that we never know how our small acts of compassion might create miracles in someone else's life. Where are you listening from today? Drop a comment below and let us know. Your story of kindness might inspire someone else who really needs to hear it. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. When we share stories of hope and healing, we help spread kindness to people who need it most. And don't forget to click on the video appearing on your screen right now for another incredible true story that will restore your faith in the power of love and second chances. Remember, everyone deserves a second chance, and sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change everything. Until next time, keep spreading hope.